What's up, guys? It's Toad. It is Monday, the last day of September. Coming off not a great weekend, really. 2-2 and then 1-1 the football, and 2-3 overall on Saturday, 1-1 overall yesterday. So a slight-ish loss overall. The 1-1 yesterday, not happy about it. I mean, the Chicago Bears, that was a winner. Kicked it off right in the 1 p.m. slate. And Arizona, they just marched down the field, scored a touchdown almost immediately. It's looking like, all right, this is pretty good, Arizona. Here we go. No, not to be. That Washington offense is apparently for real, but also Arizona's defense might be one of the worst in football. But I don't understand how Arizona only scored one more touchdown throughout the rest of the entire game. They only scored 7 more points against a very bad, I think, Washington defense as well. And Arizona's offense obviously has a lot of good skill players and are capable of putting up points. I don't understand what that was, so I'm not thrilled about that at all. We move on to today. I mean, I thought it was a difficult NFL card, to be honest, but I did like both of the sides that I played. Let's move on to today's slate, man. So Major League Baseball is kind of the talk right now as we are headed into the playoffs. The playoffs start tomorrow. Oh, boy. And we still don't know who the last wild card is from the National League. So the situation here is that the Mets in Atlanta have a doubleheader today at 1:10 p.m. Eastern and then 4:40 p.m. Eastern. So it's basically as soon as the first game ends, they got to turn the stadium over. I think I'd misspoken and I said it was in New York at one point, but no, this is the reason why these games were postponed the other day was because the hurricane was coming through. So now Mets and Atlanta have to play 2 games today, a doubleheader. The situation currently is that if the Mets and Atlanta split this series, they will both get in. If they split the doubleheader, they're both in and Arizona's out. If either the Mets or Atlanta sweeps this doubleheader, they are in, and the other one of the two is out, and Arizona will get in. So I'm thinking, can't the Mets and Atlanta just kind of come to some agreement, hey, we'll win this game and you can win this game and we'll both get in? Although I don't know, I mean, they're division rivals, so I don't know if you could really hold them to what they're saying, and maybe they each don't want each other to be met. Arizona, I mean, they're not really a team you want to face either. I don't think their offense is so capable. I don't know, but it just seems like New York and Atlanta could make some gentleman's agreement here and be like, we'll win one game and you'll win the other. I don't know. What do you mean, Rich? What are you talking about? Clint Mass's jealousy of me with anger? Who would be jealous of me, man? I mean, I'm just a lowly, degenerate sports gambler over here. I got 1 viewer, 2 viewers in here right now listening to me rant. We only have 3 games on the board today, so this is going to be quick, I think. We have 4 games. We have 2 Major League Baseball games, and then we have the 2 NFL games. So we have double headers in Major League Baseball and NFL, and I don't have a play on any of these games. Let's look at these matchups here. New York and Atlanta. I always start breaking down these starting pitching matchups. You can also look at what happened with the bullpens yesterday. Atlanta finally lost a game to the Kansas City Royals yesterday. Atlanta used 4 of their relief pitchers, but a couple of them are guys that go longer innings. So Atlanta didn't really use some of their best relievers. I mean, it's bullpen call-up still. So I don't think the fact that they use 4 relievers really matters that much. The New York Mets, on the other hand, finally won a game. So I think the Mets and Atlanta are now actually tied in the standings, but Atlanta has the tiebreaker, and Arizona, I think, also won. So I think we're back in a 3-way tie again, but Arizona loses the tiebreakers. Is that what the situation is? I don't even know. I think that is what it is. Yeah. Yes, that's exactly what it is. So we come into today's doubleheader with a 3-way tie between these 3 teams, with 2 of them being able to make the playoffs and make the wild cards. Just crazy, man. And we're basically back to where we started, because I had mentioned, I think 2 or 3 days ago, all 3 teams were tied. Then it looked like the Braves had the upper hand. They won a couple games. Both of these other teams lost a couple of games. I think Atlanta went from down one against both of them, down one game to both of them, up to one game ahead of both of them, and now Atlanta lost yesterday. The other two teams won, and they're all even again. It's crazy. The Mets yesterday, they shut out the Brewers, and the Mets didn't use a lot of their bullpen either. David Peterson, 7-inning, 1-hit performance. I did not expect that because his numbers against Milwaukee were bad. I talked about this game yesterday. Colin Ray, not really as good a pitcher necessarily. He's not that great, but he had good numbers against the Mets, and he did not get it done yesterday. Maybe he didn't care as much. So, interesting there. So, I don't think either bullpen is really in horrific shape one way or the other. I mean, the Mets have a slightly more rested bullpen here, so I guess take from that what you will. Game one is Tyler Megill against Spencer Schwellenbach. Schwellenbach, I would say, is pretty clearly the better of these two pitchers, but there are a few reasons why I don't want to actually come in and take this game. In this first game, Atlanta is down from -155 to -150, so they are a favorite, and I think rightfully so. 64% of the tickets on Atlanta, 83% of the cash, however, on Atlanta. And as far as the total, it looks like it's gone up a little bit from 7.5, getting some juice on the over. 65% of the tickets, 78% of the cash. I don't think you're going to find me on the over in that game or really many or any of these games necessarily. I tend to look more towards sides in most of these games, but Megill, 3.98 ERA, 1.27 whip on the season. 83 to 30 strikeout walk ratio. He's only pitched 72 and a third innings on the season because he got injured, I think, and he did not pitch for a while, or I don't know what the deal was, or I guess he had some games where he wasn't going deep either. I seem to remember him being injured for a while, and then he came back. He missed all of April and most of May at the very least. 83 to 30 strikeout walk ratio is not that impressive. 62 hits allowed in 72 and a third innings is good, so he walks way too many guys. But he gets a lot of strikeouts. He doesn't allow a lot of hits, so he's kind of a hard-throwing strikeout type of pitcher. And up against Atlanta, his stats are mediocre in 93 at-bats worth, 22 to 6 strikeout walk ratio, 247 average, and 702 OPS. So on like the better side, I would say. His stats are, I would say, fairly good against Atlanta. Then on the other side, you got Spencer Schwellenbach, the rookie, man, put together a really nice rookie season. And do you think we're going to see like any nerves on him because this is going to be his first time pitching in the playoffs? I don't know about that. I mean, he's been consistent, so I wouldn't really expect that, but that is one thing to consider, I guess, that it'll be his first playoffs. Or no, this isn't the playoffs yet. This is regular season. What am I talking about? It just feels like it's a playoff game. Like, this is going to feel like playoff environment stuff, man. This feels like one of those wild card playoff series at this point, but never mind. This is the regular season, so Schwellenbach, 3.47 ERA, 1.07 whip on the season, so he is the better of the two pitchers between him and Megill. He was still pitching well all the way up to the end, man, pitching consistently basically throughout the whole season. He has actually, I think, he's thrown more innings than Megill, but he's did not join the rotation until late May. 116 and 2/3 innings. He's only allowed 102 hits. That's good. 122 to 23 strikeout walk ratio. So he is a good strikeout pitcher as well. Doesn't allow that many hits, and he keeps the runners off the base pass as far as the walks, man. So he has good command. He's the one of these two pitchers that has significantly better command, and he has really good stats up against the Mets. In 46 at-bats, 15 to 1 strikeout walk ratio, and he's held them to an 087 batting average and 280 OPS. That is like dominant stuff. Although, granted, the first time the Mets faced him, they had never seen him before, but still, if you do that over the course of facing the Mets like a few different times, this is probably a few starts at this point that he's had against them, I think I'm willing to say that Schwellenbach has the upper hand over the Mets hitters at this point. I mean, these are dominant numbers in a decent-sized sample at this one because I believe he faced them at least twice, maybe 3 times. It looks like twice. He had a 7-inning, 11 strikeout, 2-hit shutout on the road, and then at home, 7-inning, 3-hit, 1-run performance with 4 strikeouts, 1 walk. The one hesitation I might have here is that Schwellenbach just faced the Mets in his last start. So the Mets are going to see him again, and that is not the case with Megill. Megill faced the Braves a little bit earlier this season, but did not face them in his most recent start. So the Mets just faced this guy. So that tends to be a little bit of an edge to the hitters when they just saw this pitcher and they get to hit against him again right after that. But to counter that again, Schwellenbach has been so good this season that it might not even matter that much. So I do lean to the Schwellenbach side. It looks like the market is indicating as far as the cash percentage on Atlanta in Game 1. Game 2, we don't even know what's going on here. I mean, pregame is listing the two pitchers as undecided here. Rich, thank you, sir. For some reason, pregame does not have the starters listed here, but ESPN does have the starting pitching matchup listed here, and I guess, trust ESPN that they're right at this point, although I guess I would say maybe this is subject to change, because you never know with a doubleheader, really, man. Like, whatever happens in Game 1, it is possible, because these are the last games of the season, man. When you're fighting to try to get a playoff spot, it's basically all hands on deck. So you might see starting pitchers come in relief in some of these games. I mean, I would doubt that these slated starters are going to wind up appearing out of the bullpen in the first game, but you never really know. But the starting pitching matchup is listed as Luis Severino for the Mets in Game 2, 3.91 ERA, 1.24 WHIP. Pretty decent numbers this season. Kind of a bounce-back season for him because he had been struggling for a couple of seasons. 161 to 60 strikeout walk ratio and 182 innings pitched, 166 hits allowed. So he's not allowing that many hits. His walk number is a bit high, but his strikeout number is actually down, which is weird. So the last couple of seasons, he had a higher strikeout rate, but his numbers are actually worse overall. So kind of interesting to see that he's maybe taking something off of his fastball and it's actually working better, or whatever he's doing there. I don't really know. So Severino, he's been decent overall, but he did just face Atlanta in his last start. So like I just said with Schwellenbach against the Mets, Luis Severino just faced Atlanta, so Atlanta's going to be facing him again, although, of course, he's been around for forever, so he's not a guy who would be unfamiliar to them anyway. He's not a rookie like Schwellenbach is. So Severino, I mean, he may still be at a slight extra disadvantage because Atlanta did just see him, and he didn't do well in that game. He gave up 7 hits and 4 earned runs in 4 innings, but 5.1 strikeout walk ratio was good, but he gave up way too many hits. Atlanta was able to hit him. Atlanta's stats over him across their careers, 94 at-bat sample size, 25 to 10 strikeout walk ratio. So, again, that's kind of too many walks there. They have a 266 batting average and 741 OPS off of him, which those numbers are not horrible. They're pretty average, I would say. So it doesn't seem like Severino has the upper hand against the Braves hitters, but the Braves hitters don't really crush him either. He didn't do well in that most recent start against them, though. So kind of hard to gauge that. And then, I mean, I don't think it really needs to even be said. Chris Sale, if he is pitching for Atlanta in Game 2 here, he is the better of the two starters. Although, of course, if Atlanta does pitch him in Game 2, I would say if Atlanta wins Game 1, that means they're going to be in. So I think this is why we don't really know what the starting pitching matchup is going to be, because whichever team wins Game 1, they might decide to not start the same guy in Game 2. Because think about it. If Atlanta wins Game 1, they're in, right? Like, all you have to do is win one of these games and you're in. So they might decide to not pitch Chris Sale in Game 2. Chris Sale might be lined up in case Atlanta loses Game 1. They want to make sure they're going to win a game, because I'm sure that they want to set the rotation up so that Chris Sale is pitching Game 1 in the playoffs, I would have to imagine. So you could see Atlanta actually not pitch Chris Sale in Game 2 if they win Game 1. So, we don't know that he is definitely going to pitch. I think Severino is more likely to pitch still in Game 2 than Sale is, because Sale is like the undisputed ace of this team, whereas Severino probably like one of the top couple of starters for the Mets. So I think it would be less likely that if the Mets win Game 1 that they would decide to move Severino up, but you never really know. Maybe they still would do that to set up their playoff rotation. You never really know. Chris Sale obviously is putting up Cy Young-esque numbers this season. He may wind up winning the Cy Young. Unclear. 2.38 ERA, 1.01 WHIP, but his Cy Young victory might be in jeopardy, actually, if Atlanta does win Game 1 and then they decide to push Chris Sale off and have him pitch Game 1 of the playoffs, because that means he'll get one fewer start. So they might put his Cy Young win in jeopardy, man. But I think Atlanta does not care about that much. I doubt that Sale cares about that either. Sale, I mean, he's a guy, he wants to win. I remember him being on the Red Sox. He was able to win a World Series with the Red Sox. I think that for the chance to win a World Series, I think he would push off that one extra start and say, okay, I don't like if for a chance to win, I'll not care about winning the Cy Young. I don't think Chris Sale is an extremely selfish man, but yeah, this season, ridiculous numbers, 2.38 ERA, 1.01 whip. He's having a resurgence, a ridiculous 225 strikeouts in 177 and 2/3 innings, 141 hits allowed, 39 walks, 9 home runs allowed. Every one of these numbers is great. He hasn't allowed very many hits at all. His home run allowed number is insanely low. Hasn't allowed a lot of walks, and he has a really high amount of strikeouts too. It's really wild to be seeing him put up numbers like this at the age of 35. I mean, he looks like the 25-year-old version of himself. It's insane to see him have this much of a bounce back. But I guess when you're finally healthy again and you don't have those injuries, and maybe you have better pitching coaches around you, you can start dominating again, man. Chris Sale, and then up against the New York Mets. He actually, out of these 4 starters, he actually has the worst numbers out of any of them against the opposing hitters. 132 at-bat sample size. He does have a 36-6 strikeout walk ratio, which is really good. But Atlanta hits 280 off him, the Mets hit 280 off him with a 779 OPS. So, really bizarre to see that Chris Sale, out of these 4 starters, actually has the worst specific matchup numbers against the opposing hitters, and it's one of the I think it's the largest sample size as well. So that does indicate something. So Atlanta, I lean to them to win game 1, and if they do win game 1, then I think you're going to see them maybe push off Sale, especially because he doesn't do that well against the Mets. Why pitch him in game 2 if you're already in? So we'll see what happens there. So I'm not going to make a play on either one of these games. In game 1, you at least know who the starting pitching matchup is. I like Schwellenbach over McGill in game 1. I lean to the Braves, I lean to the Braves in game 1. Game 2, if the Mets win game 1 and Chris Sale is pitching, I don't know that I could do it, man, because he is the better of the 2 pitchers slated for game 2 there. But like I said, his stats against the Mets are something that would give me a little bit of pause because the Mets actually are able to hit him pretty well. So that's what's going on in baseball. Laney, what's up, man? You're a Detroit Tigers fan? I don't know, man. The Tigers, they have a difficult matchup in game 1. Let's just put it that way. They're up against, who are they up against again? Framber Valdez, I think. Man, I think the Tigers, Tariq Skubal is pitching in game 1. He's their ace, undisputedly, and he's one of the best pitchers in baseball, but I think the matchup against Houston is not good for him. I'll talk about that tomorrow, but I think Houston hits Skubal pretty well, so Detroit is not able to win that first game with Skubal on the mound. I think it's going to be difficult, man. They have a difficult matchup against Houston. I think Houston is much more dangerous than Baltimore, to be honest. Houston's pitching is significantly better than Baltimore's is. Baltimore's pitching rotation and their bullpen, I think, kind of suck. So Detroit I think, kind of drew the worst matchup there. Very unfortunately for them. I mean, they didn't care about the specific matchup. I don't think they were just trying to get in. NFL, we got 2 games tonight. I already talked about them. You can go watch my NFL video where I talked about these 2 games. I leaned to the Dolphins side in the first game, Titans-Dolphins, but man, this is an ugly game. Like, why would the schedule makers do this to you, man? Like, these games are starting a half hour apart, and you know when Seahawks-Lions starts, nobody's going to be watching Titans-Dolphins. Who in their right mind? Oh, yeah, thanks. We get 0-3 Tennessee with no more Derrick Henry, who had a really great game last night for the Ravens, up against Miami with no Tua. Isn't that makes for some great Monday night? That makes for a great primetime game, dude. Miami is up from -2 to 2.5. 53% of tickets on them, 57% of the cash. So the market indicators are on the Dolphins. The line's moved up on them a bit. They have more of the cash. I do trust those market indicators, and the total is going way down from 39.5 down to 37. 59% of the tickets on the over, but 83% of the cash on the over. I don't understand the cash percentage on the over, really, unless the feeling is that, well, the drop in the total may just be because of the quarterback situation for Miami. That may actually be the reason why the total has dropped further. So maybe the cash is starting to come in thinking that the total is actually an overreaction. And I mean, it is a low total, but like, you're looking at this Titans offense, like, where is the scoring going to come from? Will Levis has been terrible. He's been maybe the worst quarterback in the league. He's I think he's thrown 5 interceptions and 4 touchdowns or something like that. Just terrible ratio. And he's lost multiple fumbles. He's like the most turnover-prone quarterback in the league. Titans defense has played well so far, but I think they've faced some somewhat weak offenses for the most part too. So I don't know that we can really say, yeah, the Titans defense is awesome, but Titans, yeah, they should have the better of these two defenses here. The Dolphins defense, I don't think is something to really consider to be one of the better defenses. I think they're one of the worst defenses in football. But both teams, I think, are going to struggle to score in this game. I mean, as evidenced by the fact that the total is way down. Will Levis is a terrible quarterback. You're basically looking at two teams that don't have a quarterback because Will Levis might as well just be a hole there. I think a hole at quarterback would actually work out better because the hole wouldn't be turning it over. Miami, Tua is injured, as we all know. Skylar Thompson was not getting the job done, even though he did have some experience playing with Miami, including that playoff game that I keep mentioning where he actually performed pretty well, and they almost upset Buffalo in early 2023, I think is when that game was, the 22-23 season, so 2 years ago. But he has really not been getting the job done, and it looks like he may be injured as well. So the next guy up for the Dolphins is Tim Boyle, who was on the Jets last year, and he played for the Jets a little bit, and he was horrific. So the Dolphins signed Tyler Huntley. I don't know if he was a free agent or what, but to me, it seems like Tyler Huntley is going to be the guy that they give the ball to in this game because he has the most NFL experience out of those three guys. He had a lot of experience on the Ravens because Lamar Jackson was hurt for extended periods of time. So Tyler Huntley came in and backed him up, and he was the starter for almost an entire season, I think, at one point. So Huntley, he's the more experienced of those three quarterbacks, and he's actually the one that's performed better, even though his numbers weren't really anything to write home about. But he was serviceable at the very least. He wasn't that bad. He was better than those two other guys have been. So I expect Huntley to be the quarterback here from Miami. And I think this line is just too much of an overreaction to Miami not having a quarterback. I mean, I like Miami, and I mentioned on my show, I said there were 2 disappointment bowls, and I mentioned that Jacksonville-Houston was one of them because both of those teams got annihilated last week. This is the other one. I forgot to specifically mention this was it. Titans and Dolphins both coming off totally embarrassing losses. Titans got blasted by Green Bay, and the Dolphins got drilled by Seattle, I believe, and only put up 3 points. So both of these teams are in bounce-back spots. But I think Miami, I think they do, even without Tua, I think they do still have the better team overall. I mean, they have more talented skill players on offense still. So the Dolphins are still the better team here. So I think you might actually be getting a little bit of value on the Dolphins side just because the Titans are such a weak team. Zach, what's up, man? Dude, I accidentally misread your, you're not in the chat anymore right now, but I misread your, when you said woke forest, I thought you were saying you just like Wake Forest on my video, and I was talking about the Wake game the other day. Woke Forest, I get you. You started watching baseball. I love baseball, and I think they've made it more boring, to be honest. I don't like any of the new baseball rules. The runner on second is terrible. I don't like the pitch clock. I loved the old baseball, dude. I don't think it was boring, but I'm like an autistic guy who's obsessed with statistics. Autistic statistics. Like, I love baseball for all those reasons. And because it's really discrete. The way my mind works, it was like every at-bat only has a certain set of possible outcomes. Like, I loved all those stats, especially when I was growing up. I loved baseball stats. Seahawks-Lions is the much better of these two games. And this one is messing with my mind, man. I don't have any plays on these games. I got to get this done quickly before I get out of here. Lions sitting at 4.5. The line hasn't really moved that much. It was at 3.5 at one point. Now it's back up to 4.5. 71% of the tickets, but only 62% of the cash. So the market read does look like it's indicating on taking the points with the Seahawks. The Lions are public, and less of the cash is on them. Total is down from 48.5 to 47. 80% of the tickets on the over and 81% of the cash on the over. You know the public's going to come in on an over in this game because it's Geno Smith against Jared Goff, man. I think the public perceives these offenses as two capable offenses with a lot of pretty talented weapons on them, so they're only going to play the over here. But 47, I mean, it's not a ridiculously high total. I mean, I don't really have a lean on the total here, and the side is just really confusing me. I would not want to be with the public, though, on the over really necessarily, but I think taking the under in a game like this is dangerous because Geno Smith does have good numbers historically against the Lions' pass defense. The Lions' pass defense is not that good. The Lions' run defense is actually quite good. They have one of the best run defenses, similar to last year, and their pass defense leaves something to be desired. Smith does well against their pass defense historically, and I think the Lions run a lot of man defense too, and Smith actually does better against man than zone, so it's not the greatest matchup for the Lions pass defense in this game. The Seahawks, I think, have actually dominated the series against the Lions recently, but the Lions weren't as good as they are now until last season. It could be a little bit of revenge for the Lions. I don't know if they're going to put that much stock into that. If anybody remembers, the Lions actually lost, I believe, their opening week game, and it might have been at home last year to the Seahawks. So they did lose the last time they played against the Seahawks, and I think they've lost the last 4 games against the Seahawks going back multiple years, but that was before the Lions had this particular team, of course, so I don't put that much stock into that. Maybe they'll be thinking about revenge for last year's opening week loss, but I don't even know if that's going to be that strong of a motivator, to be honest. I don't think we can really put that much stock into that. The Lions, they should have success running the football. The Seahawks defense has looked good so far. The Seahawks have faced weak offenses, as I pointed out on my NFL video. They've faced very weak offenses for the most part so far. They faced the quarterbacks they faced were Bo Nix, Jacoby Brissett, and they faced a Miami team, Skylar Thompson. They faced a Tua-less Miami team. So even though, the Seahawks defense has really good numbers so far this season, but I think we can dial it back a little bit. I think, yes, their defense is good, but I don't think it's the number one defense in the NFL, even though they do have Mike McDonald now, not the guy from the Doobie Brothers. Mike McDonald, the former defensive coordinator from the Ravens last year, who built that Ravens number one overall defense, a historically good defense that the Ravens had last year. He is now the head coach of the Seahawks, so he's not in the DC role anymore. So I don't know if that means he's still going to be able to build up that defense the way that he wants to, but the defense is off to a very good start this year. With him at the helm, they're probably going to be improved a bit because they weren't that great last year. They look good so far, but again, I think you can dial it back a little bit. They're a good defense. I don't know that they're going to be the best defense that's out there because the quarterbacks they face have all been terrible so far. Not great, really. And Bo Nix, maybe he'll get better, but in his opening start, he was struggling, man. He struggled yesterday, too. So, even though they somehow won that game, terrible game overall. So, again, I don't know. The Seahawks might be a little bit overrated because they are 3-0, but they've beaten not great teams in those 3 games. The Lions have faced a tougher slate of opponents. They faced the Rams in week 1 before the Rams lost all of their players, basically. But the Rams' defense looks like it's not good this year either. So the Lions did face what looks like it wasn't a very good defense. But the Rams still had at least Cooper Kupp there for that entire game. Puka Nacua, I know, went out early in that game. Then the Lions actually put up a good yardage total against the Tampa Bay Bucks, but somehow could not convert that into points. They basically shredded the Bucks defense, but the Bucks defense had a lot of problems, major injuries in the secondary for the Bucks. The Lions put up good numbers offensively, but they still didn't even score, which I don't know why that was the case. And then the Lions were able to beat Arizona. They didn't put up a lot of offense in that game, though, really, but their offense was decent enough, and it was actually Jared Goff's best game. He actually struggled in the first 2 games. Despite facing a Bucks bad secondary, a lot of that was on the ground. The Lions have turned into kind of a run-first team. Their rushing attack is actually, it's like a multi-headed monster. Their rushing attack is actually really good this season, and the Seahawks, I believe, have a better pass defense than run defense. So their run defense is actually vulnerable. So the Lions maybe trying to gash the Seahawks on the ground a bit. The Lions may be running the ball a bit, which is not exactly conducive to covering a larger number. So there are a lot of factors here. And again, I certainly have no play on this, but I'm hesitant to even have a lean on this at this point. And with all those conflicting factors, I might wind up saying you should lean with the market on this one to taking the points with the Seahawks. But I don't know if I want to do that because I think the Seahawks 3-0 is slightly misleading, and the Lions 2-1 is slightly misleading, and really, I think the Lions could easily be 3-0 so far as well, and the odds makers are telling you they're the slightly better team here. And again, the Seahawks, They're probably pretty good, though, but I don't know how much you can take away from them not being that great or not facing very good opponents so far. So that's the way I look at those games, man. Thanks for hanging out, guys, even though none of you are left in the chat. Early morning, better off dead. Only 4 games on the slate today. Let's enjoy the games today. The 2 double headers, baseball and football today, baby. I'll be back. I'll have plays, obviously, later this week. I got to get back into the black again this year, man, because I'm now, after I was in the black, I'm now slightly in the red again after a slight losing weekend. We got to turn it around again, man. I'll be back with some more plays as we get more options to play. It's going to be mostly football, and the baseball playoffs and hockey is coming up soon. Peace out, guys. Thanks for hanging out. Tower Game Tone on Twitter.